How's it going, everyone? My name is M. Kearns and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to recap the Southeast Qualifier 1 of the CCL. And so, like I said, this is just going to be Southeast only. I haven't decided whether or not yet I'm going to do the other regions or if it's just going to be Southeast, but as of right now we're just going to look over the Southeast, what I think of the qualified teams so far, what I think about the teams that didn't qualify, where I think we're headed for Qualifier 2, and what the rest of the season should look like for the Southeast. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it. So the first thing I want to say is I think it's kind of funny that everyone on Twitter is complaining about, oh, I got the hardest division or I got the hardest bracket. I can confidently say, looking at the Southeast bracket right now, that Florida Gulf Coast got the hardest bracket by far. They had to start off with Mars Hill, which is arguably the best team that money can buy in the CCL right now. Then, if they had beaten Mars Hill, they would have played Mississippi State, which is no easy task. And then, if they had done that, they would have played Shenandoah University, which is a great team filled with a lot of talent. And I've got a lot of respect for those guys. But Shenandoah didn't get there easily either because they had to play Georgia Southern, which, again, is another really good team that, I think could have made it into Division I through the winners bracket anyway. Going from bottom to top, I think it's surprising to me that UNC Charlotte didn't make the Division One. I think that they're a pretty talented team as well. With everything I know about that team, I mean, they struggled this weekend, not making Division One. They didn't win the LAN in Charlotte, which is pretty much a home game for them. They got upset by the FIU Panthers in the qualifier, who they qualified for Division One, which is good for them. Glad to see a new team in Division One. And then Alabama Crimson didn't qualify in the round one or the round two of winners, but they qualified later on in losers. But I'll touch on that a little bit later. Moving up the bracket, High Point and James Madison made it out of their little region here. Not really surprised to see that one. I am kind of surprised that High Point 3-2'd Chattanooga, which is something I didn't really see coming, knowing what I know about High Point, knowing all the players, obviously, having been there for a long time. I'm really happy for them to see them continue to keep playing these games against these tough opponents and still winning those games against those tough opponents. And then James Madison, another newcomer, really to the league, to Division One, I think could really put some wrinkles in things. They didn't drop a single map all weekend. So I think that's really impressive from them to go 3-0, 3-0, 3-0 against some decent teams, including MTSU and Cumberland. Good for James Madison. Now another little bit of a shocker here, moving up into the bracket, is that Colonel Esports, I'm just joking. They got upset by the U of NA Dragons, and that's something that I didn't really see coming. Additionally, LSU got a pretty decent path to the qualifier there, having to play JCSU and Catawba College. Catawba is a brand new team to the CCL, and U of NA Dragons got there by beating UNA Lions and Bethel Esports, both of those in a 3-0 fashion. So. And then they 3-0'd Colonel Esports, who 3-0'd Liberty. So I think that's pretty interesting. Liberty is a team that I didn't know if they were going to be back in the CCL this year or not, but I'm glad that they are. But for them to just 3-0 them, Colonel Esports to just 3-0 them, I think is pretty significant in the long, span of things. And I'll go down to the losers bracket later, like I said, but LSU and U of NA making it out of that bracket right there. And now at the very top of the bracket, we see Concord and Full Sail Armada made it all the way out. Not really surprised there. LA Tech was one that I thought could have made it out, as well as Clemson and Ole Miss. But, it's pretty interesting to see that Clemson went 3-0 against Ole Miss and Miami-Dade College, which that's a brand new team. But Clemson going 3-0 against Ole Miss is pretty interesting. I know Clemson's lost some talent and didn't know how they'd regain this year, but they were no match for Concord, losing 3-0. And those games were pretty much a blowout every single time. But it's Concord. We knew that they were going to be good. They always are. Full Sail Armada had a 3-0 against Kennesaw State. That's something that I didn't think would happen. I thought Kennesaw State was going to be really, really good this season, bringing up some good players from Academy from last season, and falling short in round 1 versus FSA. FSA then 3-2'd Newberry College and 3-0'd LA Tech. So I think FSA is one that you got to look out for here in Division 1. They may be able to pull off some upsets and be a sneaky team in the future. Now looking down at the losers bracket, some kind of no-brainers here. Alabama made the Division 1 after 3-2ing Mississippi State. That was a really good game. Mississippi State had also beat Georgia Southern and LA Tech, and Mississippi State beat Clemson 3-0, while Alabama beat LA Tech. Excuse me. So Alabama making it into Division 1 along with UCF that had a pretty, I don't want to say easy route to the to Division 1, but they had to play Radford, a brand new team. UNCG, they had to play a brand new team. Catawba, they had to play a brand new team. USC Sumter, brand new team. I think that's pretty interesting how they got all those. They got a pretty favorable bracket out of everyone. 3-0'd every single one of their losers round games and made it to Division 1. It's interesting to note that Colonel Esports got upset by USC Sumter, Florida, or USC Sumter, the Fire Ants, which is the best name I think I've ever heard, and kind of lost that. You know, I was seeing some of them complain online about they had a rough bracket, but I mean, you play a brand new team like USC Sumter and you still lose to them. I mean, you had a pretty easy shot to play the Knights there in that final round to qualify, and you just couldn't beat them. So, you know, I don't really know what to say about that for them, but rough for them to see them having to play in the D2 qualifiers next weekend. Moving on down, Chattanooga makes the cut for Division 1 as well after going 3-0 against UNA Lions and then 3-1 against Cumberland. Not really a surprise there. Mox had an unfortunate time with the Panthers of High Point, but you know, kind of expected them to make D1, so not really a surprise there. Another thing that's interesting to note, Florida Gulf Coast again getting kind of boned over here by the schedule makers. So they had Miami-Dade College, which they handled pretty easily after losing round 1. Then they had to play USF, which is a 3-0. Then they had to play Shenandoah, and while it was a 3-0, I mean, it was a pretty close series, 250-198, 6-5 in the search, and then a 3-0 in control. But the first two are pretty close between Shenandoah and Florida Gulf Coast before finally falling at the hands of Newberry, which is a team I've heard of before, but I didn't really know how good they were. They lost in a 3-1 fashion there, so FGCU going to be slumming it in D2 with the rest of us nerds, and then UNC Charlotte also falling at the hands of Newberry. So Newberry slaying Giants one by one. Shenandoah also is out, obviously, because they lost to Florida Gulf Coast. So Newberry is the last team to make D1. So that makes our list go Newberry, Chattanooga, UCF, and Alabama, making D1 from the last chance in the losers round. Mars Hill, FIU, High Point, James Madison, LSU, U of NA, Dragons, Concord, and Full Sail Armada will wrap out your D1 teams. Looking ahead to Division 2, I mean, it's pretty interesting to see, you know, what we have as far as talent still in the pool. I mean, you look at Mississippi State and VCU are pretty decent teams that didn't make it. Clemson and Georgia Southern, you know, still are formidable teams. LA Tech is a good team that didn't make it. Colonel Esports, like I mentioned, a good team that didn't make it. Liberty is still in the pool. Excuse me, they always do some damage. UNC Charlotte, Shenandoah, Florida Gulf Coast are all teams that I expect will make it into the next qualifier there. And, you know, like someone on Twitter mentioned, these teams that I just listed off, you know, shouldn't be disheartened or anything, because if you make top 4 in Div 2, you can still, you know, qualify for playoffs. You auto-qualify for playoffs if you're top 4 in Division 2. So I don't think all hope is lost for some of these teams that didn't make it into Division 1. If anything, you can still play these really good teams and, you know, scrim against them. But your game matches are going to be a little bit easier just due to the nature of the top 25 teams are gone. You know, you really don't have to play any top 25 teams in Division 2 because they already auto-qualified for Division 1. So I think that if you're Florida Gulf Coast or Charlotte or Shenandoah or, you know, some of these other teams I listed off, you have a really good shot here of still getting into the playoffs while still playing subpar talent. And, you know, you should be okay for the rest of the season because you've got this, I don't want to say buffer, but you have a little bit easier of a time to, you know, it's kind of like a preseason game. You get to hone your skills, you get to work on things that maybe, you know, you haven't really focused on when you're trying to play these other teams because you're trying to get better and you're trying to win. Where as opposed to you playing, you know, a team, let's say, I'm looking for a team that didn't do really well, like Auburn Navy got 3-0'd twice and got out round 1. So if you're playing a team like Auburn, let's say for example, in Division 2, you can work on rotations maybe, let's say, or work on call-outs, or work on setups and stuff like that, because you know their gun skill maybe not be the best, but you know you're still getting to shoot against a different team, and you get to put things that you're working on in practice into play. So I think that will come to help them the time that playoffs roll around. I know it's a long way from now, but looking at playoffs now and looking at the way that you know, maybe this will benefit the D2 teams more than the D1 teams, because you know, if I'm High Point playing you know, let's just say Chattanooga again, I'm more worried on winning the game rather than focusing on my rotations and stuff. Whereas Florida Gulf Coast has worked on those rotations, for example, and they've got them down to a T so that when playoffs come and High Point plays Florida Gulf Coast, for example, and then Florida Gulf Coast's rotations are just so perfect and down to a T because they've been playing these teams in Division 2, that may benefit them in the long run. So, yeah, an interesting day one, or qualifier one rather, for these teams, and one that I think is pretty interesting as far as things have turned out for some of these teams here. So I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you want me to do the other regions. Like I said, you know, obviously playing in Southeast, I know a little bit more about the Southeast and the teams that are playing in it. So yeah, but that's all from me today. I hope you did enjoy, seriously. Remember to leave a like and subscribe. Let me know what you think, and I will talk to you all later. Peace.